So Larry, we've had a American Democracy and Comparative Perspective project. Most Americans think that their constitutional system is perfect and the model of democracy everywhere. But it does seem to me that we could be learning from the practices of other developed democracies. And so we've done a series of studies and articles about areas where we could contemplate changing the political system based on practices that are done in other democracies. And you've talked about reforming the electoral system, so maybe could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we know that the electoral system everywhere is an important influence shaping the party system and basically the political landscape more broadly, because it generates incentives to the members of the national parliament, in this case, our Congress. The system of first past the post with single-member districts, the single-member district plurality system, can be very conducive to forming a broad majority of the center when parties need to compete for the median voter, as it was called. But I think what we've been seeing happening in the United States is that as the primary election process for the two political parties has increasingly been captured by highly ideologically motivated constituencies, the right side on the Republican Party, the left side on the Democratic Party, the system has been increasingly polarized and there's been nothing in the middle. And each party increasingly crafts highly defined appeals to its own core ideological constituency. And that, of course, is interacting with the system of gerrymandering for legislative districts, which tends to create even more ideologically coherent districts, although this has been happening in Senate races as well, which are not gerrymandered. They just use the existing state boundaries. So I think that there's something to be gained by taking a careful look at the electoral system that's used in Australia for over a century now to elect their lower house of parliament. It's called the alternative vote, or more popularly known as ranked choice voting or the instant runoff. In ranked choice voting, you keep the same districts for all offices for the Congress, the state legislature, or a statewide race for governor or senator. And instead of electing by a plurality vote where you just vote for one candidate, you can rank your choices. You rank all the candidates who are running if you want, or at least maybe the top 4 choices, if there are as many as 4 candidates. And you rank them in order of preference, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if your first preference gets the lowest number of first preference votes, that candidate is eliminated, and his or her votes are redistributed to the second preference candidates. And this process continues until somebody gets a majority of the vote, or there are only 2 candidates left and one person has a plurality. What's the advantage of this? If you have to appeal as a candidate for the second preference votes of other voters who may favor other candidates, it tends to force you to moderate your appeal. You can't just go for a core constituency. Moreover, candidates who have broader appeals may actually wind up winning because they can build coalitions from the center out. So take an example from our recent elections. You had a senator, Richard Lugar in Indiana, who was widely admired, a leader in foreign policy, pretty conservative in his voting record, frankly, but not pure enough for the Tea Party in Indiana. And so he lost the party primary. Because Indiana is one of 45 states in the United States that it has something that's called the sore loser rule, if you lose a primary election, you're not even allowed to be on the ballot in a general election. So Lugar was finished. Let's say you get rid of the sore loser rule, and let's say instead of voting, particularly in a general election, for just one candidate, you can rank your choices. Now we have a very interesting phenomenon where voters in Indiana, for example, could know two things. First of all, a moderate who lost to a kind of polarizing process in the primary could come back to contest the general election. And second of all, if that person is running as an independent, they don't have to worry that they'll be wasting their vote to vote for the independent candidate. If the independent loses, then they can rank the Democrat or Republican, whichever way they lean, as their second choice. I believe there are many elections in the United States, contests for House, state legislature, statewide office, where people would prefer an independent who's moderate to a more extreme candidate, either Democrat or Republican, but they don't want to waste their vote. And so they worry about the spoiler problem and retreat back to the party that they least dislike. I think this simple change in the electoral rule to ranked choice voting could actually open up the process to much more competition and might help to attenuate the severe polarization in our political process.
What's been the experience, though? Some American cities have tried this, right?
So we've had it used in a number of cities. I'd say generally people like it. It's a little bit more complicated in the municipal process because if you've got 25 people running in the first round, you know, or even a dozen, for example, in the race for mayor of Oakland, and you don't know them very well, and you have to rank 1, 2, 3 to wherever, you can wind up kind of guessing. I think what we've learned in the municipal elections is it's healthy when you have a large number of candidates to winnow the field down and have a second round, a runoff, maybe where you use ranked choice voting the first time, winnow the field, and then have the top 3 or 4 contest in a second round. We are seeing growing interest in this, though, as a result of the generally positive experience in municipal elections in San Francisco, in Oakland, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, in Portland, Maine. And as a result of this, there's now a ballot initiative on the ballot for this November 2016 in Maine, where voters of Maine will be deciding whether to adopt ranked choice voting for all elections in the state of Maine.
So I guess the big question is the success of this in changing our politics really depends on this presumption that there's a bunch of very civic-minded centrist voters that are really disgusted by the extremism of the two parties and that they would coalesce around kind of centrist candidates if they were given this option basically of voting for a third party. What if that's not true? Or why do you think that's true? Maybe it's that the voters themselves are so polarized and our party system is actually simply reflecting that accurately.
Well, I think there is truth in all of those statements. There's partial truth in all of those statements. It is certainly not plausible to say that there's been no polarization in the broader electorate. And we see this in the political party primary process. The primaries did not used to generate such polarizing alternatives as they're doing now. However, there's also been a self-selection process into the primaries, and we have a record percentage of the American electorate, roughly 40%, who are telling pollsters that they don't identify with either party. They consider themselves independents. Now, it's true, some of those lean to the Republicans or lean to the Democrats, but a number of them seem to want another alternative. A substantial majority of the American public is saying to pollsters they'd like to see a third alternative in the presidential election. And I think public opinion polls for people like Richard Lugar, for example, or other moderates like Bennett in Utah, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, who did survive as a write-in candidate, after she lost the Alaskan Republican primary last time, are telling us that the overall popularity of these candidates is pretty good. The problem is with an ideological constituency. So we can't know, Frank, how this is going to turn out. I think the beauty of the American political system is it's a federal system. The electoral system is actually determined at the state level, not at the federal level. So we've been experimenting with this at the municipal level. I think it would be healthy and possibly profoundly rejuvenating for American democracy to experiment at the state level and see how it turns out. My prediction is you would see a judicious sprinkling of independents starting to get elected to state legislatures, to statewide office, maybe to senator. Maine is the one state that elected a truly independent candidate, Angus King, to the United States Senate. So I think we should try it and see how it goes. My prediction is it would have a moderating influence on our politics.
Well, I observed an election in the country of Papua New Guinea back in 2006 that adopted the limited preferential vote in a situation where they don't have political parties, and for a single constituency, as many as 80 candidates will be running. And you could rank order, any number of candidates and talk about a complex election. You had to go through about, I believe, something like 40 rounds of eliminations before they could determine who won the election. But if people in Papua New Guinea can do it, then I think people in the United States can probably do it as well.
And we have a more defined party system that I think would help to winnow the field and structure it a little bit better than in Papua New Guinea.